First, President Kennedy came into office as a reader of Barbara Tuchman and her book, The Guns of August, which he read as and she wrote as explaining how the world stumbled, and the European powers in particular stumbled into World War I. And he was determined that that would not happen. That was for him the greatest uh, disaster that needed to be avoided, stumbling into a war. And yet he almost did. And the question is why and how? And it goes back to the first days of the administration when the new president was presented with a plan by the CIA, which is our worst and most failed institution in modern American history. It has created more disasters than any other institution in America. Presented President Kennedy with the plan that had been concocted in the Eisenhower period to invade Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion. And Kennedy was very uneasy about this, but he was new and young and did not feel in a position, right or wrong, to stop a plan that was underway. Of course, we know that the invasion was a disaster. What Kennedy was briefed on by Allen Dulles was a set of lies about how smoothly this would go, because Allen Dulles was intent on Kennedy having to react to an initial failure by giving air cover and bringing in the Air Force to attack Cuba. Kennedy did not do that, but he did go along with the basic plan, and the invasion of Cuba was in every way an utter failure and debacle. But one of the things that it led to was Khrushchev's decision to put nuclear arms in Cuba because this was protecting a new ally. Of course, Khrushchev's decision was harebrained and reckless without question. And when he told his foreign minister, Andrei Gromyko, about the idea, Gromyko said, "What? A war?" And Khrushchev said, "No, no, of course not a war. Not a war. Just let the Americans taste a bit of their own medicine." So he wanted to put it back to us. And of course, it almost led to nuclear war. I'm sure everybody knows, by the way, that we came within 1 second of nuclear war, not minutes or hours, but 1 second, because even after Kennedy and Khrushchev had agreed on backing off the missile crisis, the Russians would remove their missiles. Months later, the United States would remove its missiles from Turkey, and the U.S. would pledge never to invade Cuba again. Even after that agreement was reached, a disabled Soviet submarine came within 1 second of launching a nuclear-tipped torpedo, which, had it gone off under American doctrine, would have led to a full-fledged nuclear attack by the United States on the Soviet Union, Central Europe, and China, with an estimated 700 million deaths at the time, perhaps ending life on the planet, we now understand. But this came within a second because the captain's order to fire the torpedo was overruled, countermanded by a superior party officer that was in that submarine, that was part of a squadron in the Caribbean. Well, suffice it to say that one damn thing nearly led to another, to another, to another, to the end of the world that neither side wanted. So you could say Kennedy made his blunders, which he did, and he lied about the Bay of Pigs to Khrushchev when the invasion first started, and there were tensions. But through the Cuban Missile Crisis, both sides came to realize that the stakes were so high and the events were nearly out of control that they must not let that happen again. In 1963, Kennedy, as I think everybody knows, uh, reached the decision that he would pull out of Vietnam. He started pullout in the November of 1963 with a reduction of 1,000 of the so-called advisors there. His real plan was win re-election in November 1964 and then pull out entirely from Vietnam. Many people believe, I am among them, that Kennedy was assassinated by the CIA or parts of the CIA and other rogue parts of the US government, substantially for his peace initiatives, actually. This is one of the most grim parts of all. Definitely, there was CIA involvement in the assassination that to this day is covered up. So all of this is to say that was Kennedy telling the truth that the U.S. would never start a war? Well, not quite, because the U.S. had actually started a war in the Bay of Pigs. But Kennedy was trying to get on top of this. He was trying to control a war machine. One needs to understand America is a war machine. When you have 750 overseas military bases in 80 countries, when your military and security budgets, adding up everything, the Pentagon, the CIA, the other intelligence agencies, Homeland Security, the nuclear program and the energy department, the veterans programs, when you add it all up, it's about $1.5 trillion. When you have a business so large, that's a war machine, always revving. And it's the job of the president to stop the war machine. In 1963, President Kennedy tried desperately to stop the war machine. And he made a brilliant step, the most brilliant of any of our presidents from then until today.